The officer stopped walking. He was doing a routine sweep of a property in the mountains of Cloudcroft, New Mexico. A welfare check. Standard procedure. He had no reason to expect anything beyond an empty house and a couple who had simply moved on without telling their friends. And then something hit him. A smell. Faint. Coming from the direction of the carport. Wrong in a way he could not immediately name. He noted it. And then he walked away. Craig Thatford was buried less than 10 feet from where that officer was standing. He had been there for months. Hidden under a pile of cardboard boxes, soil bags, rugs, and black plastic sheeting in a carport next to a tractor on the property where he had lived. While police searched. While welfare checks were conducted. While his wife sat inside that same house and told investigators her husband was in Mexico with another woman. He was never in Mexico. He was never in Texas. He was never anywhere. He was right there the entire time. This is the story of Craig Thatford. A 60-year-old business owner from Cloudcroft, New Mexico who vanished in January of 2025. A man whose own friends had to call police because they had not heard from him in nearly 2 months. And a case that would expose one of the most methodical and coldly calculated cover-ups investigators in Otero County had ever encountered. Forged notes. Disabled security cameras. Chemical odor masking. Hundreds of thousands of dollars spent. And a body hidden in plain sight on the very property police searched multiple times. And at the center of all of it, a woman with 3 ex-husbands, a violent history that every single person around her knew about, and a story that kept changing every time someone asked a question. Hit that like button right now. Share this video immediately because this case is still in pre-trial and awareness matters. Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications on because we cover every layer of cases like this one and we do not stop until we reach the end. Stay until the very last second of this video because the detail that cracks this case open does not come from investigators. It comes from a daughter who finally decided to talk. Let us begin. Cloudcroft, New Mexico, who Craig Thatford was. Cloudcroft, New Mexico sits tucked among wooded acreage and mountain terrain in the southern part of the state. It is the kind of place where the air smells like pine and the nearest city is an hour of winding road away. Small. Quiet. The kind of community where everybody knows everybody and unusual smells in the mountains are not always what they seem. Craig Thatford was 60 years old. He owned a roofing business that had given him and his wife Dena a comfortable life. They owned multiple residential properties across New Mexico and Texas. They took luxury vacations. They lived well. Craig was known in the community as a generous man. A volunteer firefighter with the James Canyon Fire Department. The kind of neighbor who would do anything for anybody. The kind of man people described in one word. Good. He lived with Dena in a large 3-story house on a sprawling wooded property outside Cloudcroft. 2,000 square feet. Multiple carports and outbuildings. A workshop. A man cave. A pool room. A safe in the basement holding what he told people was $1.5 million in cash. On the surface this was a picture of a successful life built over decades of hard work. But inside that house something dark had been building for a long time. And in January of 2025 it came to a head in a way that nobody who knew Craig ever saw coming. Nobody, that is, except the people who knew Dena. Part 2, the call that started everything. In May of 2025 the Otero County Sheriff's Office received a welfare check request. The man on the phone was Larry Scott, a friend of Craig's calling from Texas. His voice carried the particular tension of someone who had been trying to convince themselves everything was fine for weeks and had finally run out of reasons to believe it. He explained that nobody in Craig's circle had been able to reach him for nearly 2 months. Not his friends. Not his family in Texas. And not his wife. Something about that detail was unusual in a way that ordinary missing person reports are not. Most missing person calls come within days. 2 months of silence from a man everybody described as someone who always answered his phone or called back was not a man who had gone on a trip. It was something else. Officers were dispatched to the property on Heatherwood Drive in Cloudcroft for a standard welfare check. They pulled up the long driveway and stepped out into the mountain air. The house was large. Lights were on throughout. But nobody answered the door. Looking through the windows, one officer noticed boxes stacked near the walls as if the couple had been in the process of moving or had already left. As another officer moved toward the carport, he slowed down. Something in the air was off. A faint, strange odor drifted through the space around him. In the mountains with wildlife and wooded terrain, unusual smells are not uncommon. The officer noted it, brushed it off, and moved on. Craig Thatford was buried less than 10 feet away. With the home appearing vacant and no immediate signs of foul play, officers called it off and left. The impression was that the couple had likely moved out and simply forgotten to inform their friends. They drove back down the mountain with no idea what they had just walked away from. The second call, and the story that did not add up. The very next day, the Otero County Sheriff's Office received a second welfare check request about Craig Thatford. This one came from his grandson Cody Gibson. And what Cody had to say changed the entire scope of the case. According to Cody, his grandfather had not been seen for over 4 months. Not 2 months as Craig's friend Larry believed. 4 months. Since January. And the reason no formal missing person report had been filed earlier was because Dena Thatford had been telling everyone who asked that Craig was in Mexico with another woman after filing for divorce. That story did not sit right with Cody. This was not his grandfather. It was just really strange. Following the second call, Otero County Sheriff's deputies were dispatched back to the property. This time, instead of simply knocking and leaving, they widened the scope. They began canvassing the surrounding properties, speaking to neighbors who might have seen or heard something. What they heard stopped them in their tracks. Neighbor after neighbor described Craig in the same terms. Beloved. Generous. Present. A man who had talked his neighbors into joining the volunteer fire department. A man who would do anything for anybody. A man who was simply there, reliably and visibly, until January. And then was not. The canvass also surfaced the first conflicting details about Dena's story. One neighbor said Dena had told her Craig went to Texas to help his sick mother. Cody said Dena told him Craig went to Mexico after the divorce. 2 different stories. 2 different locations. 1 missing man. Investigators were beginning to suspect they were not dealing with a missing person case at all. Dena Thatford, the history nobody wanted to say out loud. The case was assigned to Detective Bobby Curtis with the district's Major Crimes Unit. As Curtis began digging into the background of both Craig and Dena, one detail stood out immediately above everything else. Craig Thatford was Dena's 4th husband. She had been married 3 times before. And those relationships had not ended quietly. Curtis decided to call the people who might know Dena best. Her ex-husbands. What she heard from them would not just explain where Craig might be. It would explain what kind of person Dena Thatford was. The first ex-husband described a decade of survival alongside a woman he called demon-possessed. He spoke about her alcohol-fueled rages, about learning to simply stay out of her way when she was drinking, about the time she allegedly tried to run him over with a car. The second ex-husband was more direct. She is what they classify as a binge-drinking alcoholic, he told Curtis. Whiskey turns her evil. She assaulted me multiple times. Broke 2 pairs of glasses. Hit me twice. Tried to kill me. And then he said something that made Detective Curtis stop writing. I tried to warn Craig. She said it directly, in front of me and my wife. If I could kill Craig and get away with it, I would do it. Curtis dug further. Dena had worked as a correctional officer for nearly 8 years in the early 2000s. In 2008 she had been arrested for allegedly trying to stab that same ex-husband while intoxicated. In 2010 he alleged she found his pistol and chased him pulling the trigger. The gun was not loaded. He survived. She was never charged. Investigators also reached out to Dena's daughter Leslie, who had lived with Craig and Dena for a period. Leslie did not hesitate. "My mom is crazy. She has tried to kill me before. She stabbed one of her other husbands. She tried to run my real dad over with a car. She had my sister hog-tied and thrown in a car one time. She has always been an alcoholic. She also does other drugs. And I think she might have been trying to poison Craig or messing with his medication." Two people were now separately suggesting Craig might be dead. And that Dena could be responsible. The interview, and the woman who believed her own plan was working. While Curtis was building the background picture, Detective Deputy Roger Schoolcraft was sent to the Thatford property to speak with Dena directly. Dena had apparently returned home and was acting as if nothing had happened. What followed was one of the most extraordinary interviews in this entire case. Dena greeted Deputy Roger warmly. She offered him coffee. She walked him through the house. She was relaxed, conversational, seemingly unconcerned. She told him Craig had gone to help his mother in Texas. Then corrected herself and said he had gone to Mexico. She explained the separation, the affair she suspected, the divorce she had filed. And then she showed him what she believed was her most powerful piece of evidence. A handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "This is our communication right here for the last 2 months," she told him. "There have been several. This one is from about 2 weeks ago." The note was addressed to Dena. Signed as if from Craig. It referenced a fishing trip to El Salto in Mexico and asked her to forward calls from his family. Deputy Roger examined it carefully. If he tried he could not have sounded fully convinced. But he took note of it and let Dena believe her plan was working exactly as she intended. Then Dena mentioned the safe. "Craig keeps all our money in cash," she told him. "I cannot get into the safe. I do not have the combination." She said the safe held $1.5 million. Deputy Roger asked to see it. She led him downstairs. He stood in the basement and looked at the safe. He had no way of knowing in that moment that he was standing in the very spot where Craig's body had remained for days after he was shot before it was moved and hidden in the carport outside. Before he left, Roger revealed something he had been holding back deliberately. He told Dena quietly that the vast majority of his career had been spent in homicide investigation in Albuquerque. That he came back out of retirement 2 years earlier because he got bored sitting at home. Dena's face changed. It was the face of a woman who had just realized that the man sitting in her living room was not a deputy conducting a routine welfare check. He was a homicide detective who had seen this before. And he was not leaving convinced. What the neighbors knew. After leaving the house, Deputy Roger did something that would prove to be one of the most important decisions in the entire investigation. Instead of driving back to the station, he stayed in the neighborhood and kept talking to people. What he heard next made everything click. A neighbor named Thomas, a fellow volunteer firefighter who had been one of Craig's closest friends on the mountain, told Roger something Craig had said to him months earlier. Craig had told him directly, "If anything ever happens to me, I do not want one of these calls." And then he had said something else. "Dena has the combination to the safe." Dena had the combination to the safe. The same safe she had told Deputy Roger she could not access. The same safe she had told him held $1.5 million that she had no way of reaching. Thomas also told Roger something else. When he and Dena had first met years earlier, she had said something to him that he had never forgotten. She did not say she would kill Craig. But she said that if it came to that, she would be okay with it. Roger recorded every word. He drove back to the station and relayed everything to Detective Curtis. The financial motive was becoming clearer by the hour. In the 4 months since Craig was last seen, Dena had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. A new house. A new car. Funding for her son's new business. Burning through the money of a man she was simultaneously telling everyone was alive and well and fishing in Mexico. The safe, the hole in the ground, and the confession that came from within. 5 days after his first visit, Deputy Roger returned to the Thatford property for a follow-up. As he pulled up and stepped out of his car, he noticed something unexpected. Dena was outside. And she appeared to be doing something with the ground near the carport. Flattening it, she told him. Preparing an above-ground garden bed. Rolling rocks back into place. Roger noted it. Said nothing. And went inside. During the conversation that followed, Dena said something that stopped Roger cold. Speaking about the investigation, about the questions, about everything that had unfolded since Craig disappeared, she said quietly and almost to herself, "I think if I had just left when he told me to, none of this would have happened." Investigators noted those words immediately. Because that sentence does not come from a woman whose husband left her for someone else. That sentence comes from a woman who knows exactly what happened and why. In the weeks that followed, Dena vanished. Phone calls from detectives went straight to voicemail. Investigators caught wind of rumors that she was talking about fleeing to Jamaica. Others suggested she might be planning to take her own life. Then an old colleague of Dena's from her correctional officer days called Detective Curtis with a tip that changed everything. He had been in contact with a mutual friend. And that mutual friend had told him something. She said she shot him. Still no body. Still no physical evidence. Still no arrest warrant. But the picture was now complete enough that Curtis knew they could not wait any longer. She obtained a search warrant for the Thatford property and coordinated the Major Crimes Unit for a full execution of that warrant. At the same time, officers learned that Dena was at her mother's house in Texas and had attempted to take her own life. Curtis drove to Texas to speak with Dena's mother Mary while the search team descended on the mountain property in New Mexico. Mary was visibly shaken. She could not explain why her daughter would do something like that. She gave investigators possible addresses. Hotels. Hospitals. Anywhere Dena might be. The search, hidden in plain sight. Back in Cloudcroft, the Major Crimes Unit arrived at the Thatford property with a search warrant and the full weight of the investigation behind them. They entered through the garage and swept the house from the basement up. What they found inside told the story of a deliberate and methodical cleanup. Multiple bottles of bleach scattered throughout the house. A surveillance system that had been physically disabled, the cameras removed or destroyed. Multiple areas showing signs of recent heavy cleaning. A table saw in the workshop with what appeared to be blood traces. Suspected splatter on the walls of the workshop area. The basement safe was opened by a locksmith. Inside, investigators found $84,200. Far less than the $1.5 million Dena had described to Deputy Roger just weeks earlier. The rest was gone. Spent. On a house, a car, a son's new business, and whatever else a woman does with a dead husband's money while she tells his family he is fishing in Mexico. But Craig's body was not in the house. Officers spread out across the property. The man cave. The outbuildings. The workshop. Nothing. Then, back at the station, a detective's phone rang. It was Dena's daughter Leslie. The same Leslie who had spoken to investigators weeks earlier. But this time Leslie had something different to share. Something she said her siblings had known for a long time. Something that had been eating at her until she finally decided she could not stay quiet any longer. She told the detective what her mother had confided in her. Craig had pushed her down the stairs. She shot him. He fell into the pool room. She left him lying there on the floor for a day and a half. Then she wrapped him in a rug and plastic sheeting, tied it with rope, used the tractor to move him, and buried him in the carport. And then Leslie said the words that sent every officer on that property straight to the western carport. It is like a hidden in plain sight type thing. I think he is probably in the one by the bunkhouse where something is parked on top of him. Officers converged on the detached metal carport west of the main house. Next to the tractor they found a large pile of cardboard boxes, soil bags, rugs, and other materials stacked carefully on top of each other. They began clearing the pile layer by layer. Black plastic sheeting became visible underneath. And inside it, wrapped and concealed beneath everything stacked on top of him, was Craig Thatford. He had been there the whole time. Through the welfare checks. Through the interviews. Through the second visit when Dena was outside flattening the ground and talking about garden beds. Through every single moment of this investigation he had been right there on his own property less than 30 feet from his own front door. What the autopsy confirmed and where the case stands now. Craig Thatford's body was transported for autopsy. Doctors estimated he had been deceased for weeks to months, placing his death in January of 2025, consistent with the timeline investigators had built from the very first welfare check call. 3 to 4 gunshot wounds were found on the left side of his body. 1 through the heart. The manner of death was ruled homicide. His identity was confirmed through fingerprints. With a body, a cause of death, a financial trail, a forged note, disabled security cameras, chemical masking agents, and a statement from the alleged killer's own daughter, an arrest warrant was issued for Dena Thatford. Officers in Texas located her at Red River Hospital where she had been taken after her suicide attempt. She was found alive and unharmed. She was taken into custody without incident. She was calm during transport. Almost, investigators noted, as if she had been expecting this moment for months and had simply been waiting for it to arrive. Detective Curtis conducted the formal interview at the station. She sat across from Dena with a body and what she believed was more than enough evidence to pursue first-degree murder charges. She began to ask the question the entire investigation had been building toward. Why? Why was Craig truly killed? Dena looked at her calmly. And then she said 5 words. I am going to need a lawyer. The interview ended there. Dena Thatford was booked into jail without bond on charges of first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. As of March of 2026 her case remains in the pre-trial phase. She is presumed innocent unless convicted in a court of law. If convicted of first-degree murder she faces life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. If convicted of second-degree murder she faces 18 years plus additional time for the tampering charge. The question of why Craig Thatford died remains officially unanswered. Prosecutors believe the motive was financial. $1.5 million in a safe, multiple properties, a roofing business, and a wife who knew the combination the whole time and was about to lose access to all of it in a divorce. Craig Thatford was 60 years old. He was a volunteer firefighter. He was a neighbor who would do anything for anybody. He was a friend who always answered his phone. He was a man who told the people around him what to do if anything ever happened to him, as if some part of him already knew that it might. And he was buried under a carport on his own property for months while his wife spent his money and told his family he was fishing in Mexico. He deserved better than that. He deserved the truth told completely and without compromise. And now it has been. If this case moved you, if it made you angry in exactly the way that cases like this should, share this video right now. Leave a comment below and tell me what moment in this investigation stopped you completely cold. Was it the officer who smelled something in that carport and walked away? Was it the forged note on the kitchen counter? Was it the safe with $1.5 million that turned into $84,200? Or was it the daughter who finally decided she had stayed quiet long enough? Subscribe to Black Veil Crime Files with notifications on. Craig Thatford's trial is coming. And when it does we will be here. This is Black Veil Crime Files. I will see you in the next one. Blackheart.